traditional line of the, sort of the marginalia of great thinkers or great famous people. That's obviously kind of well known. But I've been trying to just do the everyday, kind of here comes everybody.
So many different directions this could go. It never really occurred to me before. I kind of do specialize in signatures. When I started as a collector 35 years ago, my first goal was to collect a book written and signed by every president.
Okay.
Well, I was pretty naive because not all presidents wrote a book, and I certainly found out very quickly I couldn't afford a Washington or a Jefferson or a Lincoln.
Right.
So my goals morphed over time.
20th century presidents, maybe, or 19th and 20th. Yeah.
Well, then it became I wanted to get every president's signature.
Okay. And
then it became, more presidents' politics, and expanded to first ladies and other politicians. And about 6-7 years ago, when I was beginning to think about retirement, I realized my collection didn't have the same emotional shot in the arm that it once did. And I realized there was nothing that I owned that I wouldn't part with for a price.
Huh. You had just looked at it long enough, or the thrill of the chase was over?
Yeah, kind of like that. And even now, when I buy something, I'll hold on to it for 3 or 4 months before I even bibliography it and put it online for sale, because I just want to have it around for a while.
Yeah, see how it changes the energy in the room.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I really changed the energy yesterday. I bought myself a present.
What'd you buy?
Other than underwear, I don't think I've ever bought myself a present in the last 5 years. I bought a ventriloquist dummy.
Is he going to be asking the questions on the show today?
No, but he will in a few weeks once I get the hang of it.
Oh, man. Have you given him a name yet?
Well, he came with the name Woody.
With what? Woody?
Woody, yeah. And he's a never used original from the Mayer Corporation in Maryland, one of the premier ventriloquist company. And I went to go buy a lot of magic books. And this magician had picked him up in a lot of stage material that he had bought.
Move.
Who's laughing in the background? Who's joined us?
That's me.
Is that you, Lee?
Yes, it is.
Are you laughing at Woody?
Yes, I was laughing at Woody. I can't wait to see him. I do agree with you about having things for a while and then being willing to sell them. It partly is just the thrill of the acquisition and the opportunity to hold it and love it for a while, and then sure, somebody else can enjoy it for a while for a price. So I agree with that. I also brought my own book with some marginalia.
Good.
With personal marginalia to share.
I can't see anything. I wish you could hold it up to. Can I see your video? Have we started?
I don't think I'm on yet. Am I on yet?
No. There you are.
There we go.
Oh, and there's Woody.
It is a record of where and when flowers were observed by us. That goes back. The book is from 1975. It doesn't go back that far with the comments, but it goes back a good way. So I brought it to share. And Ed, can I at some point reference a book that has to do with Women's History Month that my son and daughter-in-law recently purchased for their daughter when they were at an independent bookstore in San Antonio last week.
I think you and I are going to have some time at the end of the show. We got a lot of time.
Okay.
So I'll be looking for.
Woody.
Then. There's Woody.
There he is.
Oh, give me a kiss, Woody. Okay, that's it for now. In the future, you can come back and share your bibliophilic ideas with us. Okay. All right.
We're going to start wondering about you in a while, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you've been in lockdown too long.
I have been. I'm divorced. I want to live alone. I've got a cat, and that's it.
My cat is joining us if she steps another foot into the screen. She's sitting right here beside me.
I don't know. There was just something about that ventriloquist dummy that made me want to.
Did you buy any magic books?
Well, that was the other thing. I got a good deal on the magic books and the ventriloquist books, and he had some old, early 1900, late 1800 books, so it was a good deal.
Well, if you decide to do magic tricks on the show, let me know, because my 6-year-old grandson is really into magic, so he would like to see this.
No, I don't think that's going to be happening. Does anybody see the timer? Are we live?
We are.
We are. Oh, sorry about that, folks. Hi. Welcome to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Welcome, everybody. The Rare Book Cafe is the only weekly live stream program on the internet devoted entirely to rare and collectible books and the people who love them. And those people are you. We're here every Saturday, 12:30 Eastern, 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time, and 7:30 Alexandria, Egypt, for our friend Shafir Al-Fifi, where he'll be coming in from today. We're live streaming to you on Facebook and on YouTube, and our amazing producer, Alan Smith, the coordinator, technician, researcher, occasional bookseller, I imagine, because he's putting the show together, is doing an amazing job of bringing this show to so many new venues. You can now hear us on podcast, the Rare Book Cafe Raw. And the best thing about that is you don't have to look at me. But anyways, we're now on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Radio Public. Just do a search on Rare Book Cafe Raw, and we'll pop up. So now I've got with me a couple of guests. Andrew Stauffer, professor from the University of Virginia, is going to be talking to us a little bit later in the show. Andrew, greetings.
Hello, nice to be here. Nice to see you both. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. And Lee Lynn, who just dumped her purse on the desk there.
I just dumped ginger ale trying to get the cat off.
Oh my good. Okay, well, you take care of the cat, and we're going to come back to you.
Okay.
Andrew's on the faculty of the University of Virginia, as well as the Rare Book School there. He's recently published a book, Book Traces. Is that right? Is that the name of it, Andrew? Book Traces?
Yep, Book Traces.
Who's your publisher?
University of Pennsylvania.
Up the road a little ways.
That's right.
Good. Now, folks, we've got some live guests with us today, but many of our segments, or several of our segments, are pre-recorded because either our guests couldn't join us, or it just made more sense. Coming up today, we're going to have David Hess from the Bookman in Orange, California, Things Found in Old Books. Lynn Thompson from the Henry Bemis Books in Chester, South Carolina, who's also our associate producer. He's pre-recorded a session on the story behind the story. This week, illustrator Ralph Caldecott. And following Lynn's talk, we're going to have Mary Kay come back and share with us a few comments about the Caldecott Medal. Sharif Afifi from Alexandria, Egypt. Just got notified he's not going to be live, but he's got a short pre-recorded segment on repairing paper tears. So that's going to be interesting. That's something I need to do from time to time. And then stick around to the end of the show. Lee and Barbara Lowe and I are going to talk about an amazing experience last week at the virtual Ephemera Fair. It was a great time. And finally, finish up with a tribute to Beverly Cleary, the beloved Beverly Cleary. There can't be a child who graduated from elementary school in the last 60 years who didn't read or have read to them a Beverly Cleary book. She passed away on Thursday at 104 years old. Okay, we're going to get things going with Things Found in Old Books by David Hess. Bring them aboard there, Alan. Now, Alan,
Hello, this is David Hess, from the Bookman in Orange, California, with my weekly visit to things found in the pages of old books. So we'll jump right into it. Today I found some interesting stuff. This week I found some interesting stuff. I'm hyper aware now of things in books because of this segment. I'm always looking even harder than I used to look. But I did find something quite fascinating in this old science fiction paperback by Michael Moorcock. And in it was this business card. Now, this business card is from Dr. Donald A. Reed. Now, he was the president of the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films in LA. I'm doing a little research on Mr. Reed. He created the Saturn Awards. Now, I don't know, I think they're still going, but it's the awards for best science fiction, fantasy, and horror films. He was also the founder of the Dracula Society. And he did all kinds of stuff in the early days of science fiction and fantasy. And he also apparently had a bookstore in Santa Monica, California. And so I feel that this is a real find here for me, this business card, stuck in a book of Michael Moorcock. This is a good one. On to the next find. There's a book here by Paul Engel, American Song, a book of poems, 1934. In this particular book, I found 3 items, all of kind of unique interest. One would be this clipping. There's Mr. Engel himself, and it is a New York Times book review of this particular book, published Sunday, July 29th, 1934. And this is the review of the book that just came in, and it says, Paul Engel's American Song may prove a literary landmark. I don't know about that, but he had a head start. I don't know what happened to Mr. Engel. Maybe people out there know him better than I do. I've never really heard much about him since. And we have also in the same book, this little item is called Hall House for Art Students. It's in Baltimore, Maryland. And what it is, it's a little guide on house regulations for art students, all girls, all women, living in this Hall House for art students. And it's a regulation and the things that you can do and you shouldn't do in the house, and how much it costs. It is $10.50 per week, and so beginning in October. And it's actually quite interesting. There's no date on it, but I'm assuming it's around the 30s as well, with the vintage of the book. Also, the third thing found in this book here, the poetry book, is a Christmas card. Christmas Wishes. Kind of has that 30s decoration, 30s printing style. Inside, there's not much written, but it's, again, has the 30s typography, and signed by Don Luckenbill. Very short and sweet. Kind of a beautiful little card with a little ribbon attached to it. Yeah, quite interesting. All right, next. In this book on speech, which is an unremarkable book, from the 50s, I found this card. Let's see here. And I thought this was real interesting, kind of historically interesting. What it is, it's a card being sent to people telling you what your zip code is. It just came out. It was dated 1967. So in 1967, they sent you this card and they said, this is your new zip code. And what you should start do, and it tells you on the back, is you should start putting it on your letters. If you start putting it on your letters, they'll start getting there sooner. It'll be no mismailed and all that kind of stuff. So, so here you go. This card is 94109. I looked that up, and that's in San Francisco somewhere. Well, there you go. Put that. Make sure to put those on your letters. Your zip code. 1967. That helps you actually date books sometimes. If the publishers, if you're looking at a book, how old it is, if it doesn't have a zip code, you know, this was before 67. You can work backwards. Now, in this here, got the boat art on it, so it's a little shiny. It's called Guidance for Today and Tomorrow. Compiled from the writings of Shoghi Effendi. It's a Baha'i faith, the Baha'i faith book, which we're getting. We don't get a whole lot of the Baha'i faith books, but they are still requested to this day. And within it, I found a couple of things, interesting items. One is this handwritten piece of paper. What it is, it's someone's neatly written like quotes and verses from the book itself. And so it's all written on kind of like this onion paper, and it was for their edification, and it was folded up and put in the book here. Next to it is a little envelope. Within the envelope, pictures. So we got a little picture here, and I'm sure this is for a Baha'i faith meeting or group. And on the back is dated April 1959. In the same batch of pictures, they're in the house. People are in the house here. A little shiny there, and they're there for the Baha'i faith meeting, also dated May 59. And you have inside the house, they're probably having cookies and so forth. May 59. And sitting around the living room talking, dated May 59, which really gives you, if you look at the living room, you can see the chairs and the tables and the lamps and stuff. And because it's not a professional picture, it's actually taken by, just a layman, so to speak. It's fascinating to look at the things that are in a house in the 59. And I just found these pictures absolutely fascinating, and it's so odd getting pictures in a book, because you really get a sense of time and place, and real live human beings involved with the book that is coming through your store 60 some years later, coming through your store and being a part of your shop. And well, that's all I have for today. If you have anything that you would like to share, please email me at ebookman.com. Send a picture, a little description of what you found, maybe where you found it, and I would be more than happy to share it with our audience today. Thank you for stopping by, and we will see you next week.
Andrew, can we bring Andrew in for a moment?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Andrew, every week David comes on with a segment about tangible, physical things found in books. Why don't you share with our audience what you're finding in books?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm thinking I should have called my book Things Found in Books rather than Book Traces, but it's a very similar kind of project. It just has some different constraints. I'm looking at library books, academic libraries for the most part, circulating collections, not rare book rooms, pre-1923 imprint dates, and marginalia things like ephemera, locks of hair, flowers, and things like that. trying to make the case that the books on the shelves, not the rare books, but the circulating books, mostly from the 19th century, have a research value and have a kind of archival manuscript richness to them that makes them important as part of the scholarly record going forward. Of course,
so you actually are looking for physical items as well, four-leaf
anything that we
clovers.
find. Yeah, in fact, I'll share my screen if that's all right, just to give you a sense here.
Yeah, just a quick one. We're going to be back to you for a longer segment, but share with our folks a
Great.
quick idea.
This is just the cover of the book, but you can see that what they chose were these doll clothes that were in a copy of Sir Walter Scott from 1833, antebellum fashions that some little child had made and put them in there. So we do find things like that, but then a lot of the work has been based on the writing in the book, the marginalia, the inscriptions, and the ways that people interacted and left traces of their reading experience. Excellent.
This is fascinating. I love it. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll be back to you in a little bit.
Great.
But right now, we're going to go to our friend Sharif Alfifi from the Biblioteca Alexandria. I love saying that. That's quite the tongue twister. And where he is a curator of conservatorship. Last week, he talked to us about microspectroscopy, looking behind the front layer of the pages and the front layer of the books. And this week he's on with a short segment about repairing paper tears. Now, I know one of our regular guests, Sophia Bogle, is probably shuddering right now. She's online with us on Facebook, and she's saying, no, please don't tell people how to fix their repairs. Sorry, Sophia, we're going to do it. Okay. Let's bring up Sharif. Yeah, that was great. That was very professional. That will be a great resource to any amateur or professional. But I did want to point out, I was joshing with Sophia before the video, but she replied via Facebook, "Oh, it's okay. I do it all the time." Well, I don't do it all the time. Most of us don't do it all the time. My recommendation, what I do when I have to repair a small paper cut, is I do one practice first, and then you're in the mood. Then you've got the motivation. Then you've got all the kinks out, and then you move to the one that's either in a book or a document or a manuscript, the one that you're ultimately trying to save. But you're absolutely right there, Sophia. Us amateurs shouldn't take on more than we can chew. Thank you very much. All right, now we're going on to the story behind the story from Lynn Thompson. Last week, Lynn told us about children illustrator Kate Greenaway, whose illustrations greatly influenced Victorian fashion. This week, he is going to consider Randolph Caldecott, the illustrator for whom the medal is named after. And then Mary Kay Thompson is going to join us for a quick chit chat about the Caldecott Medal. Alan, bring us Lynn.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lynn Thompson, and this is the Story Behind the Story, a weekly feature on the cafe in which we look at books, their authors, their illustrators, and the influences they had in their time and the influences their times had on them. I'm taking a break this afternoon from gardening in Chester, South Carolina, after a very wet winter. Spring has finally arrived. The daffodils are coming up and the silver bells, and I am out madly digging up and cutting down brush and making my back hurt. So it's a welcome opportunity to visit with you again for a few minutes and talk a little bit about another of our month's worth of illustrators who influenced the modern children's book. This time, the author and illustrator Randolph Caldecott, a Briton born in 1846, died in 1886. He was a lad from the English city of Chester who came late in the string of his father's 13 children by 3 different wives. He took to sketching at an early age, and at 15 he left school and took a job as a bank clerk, pursuing his art as a hobby. He got a break in 1861 at the age of 15 when the Illustrated London News ran his drawing of a spectacular hotel fire in Chester, the equivalent of a news photographer's shot today. That opening led to placement of other work in local and London periodicals. He was also able, at the age of 23, to get a painting in the Royal Manchester Show of 1869. In 1872, Caldecott took a post with a bigger London bank, hoping being at the center of art and publishing would better his prospects as an artist. And within 2 years, he was on his own, making a living off commissioned works. He settled in rooms in Bloomsbury and ran with the pre-Raphaelite swells of the day. Caldecott illustrated novels and sketched parliamentary debates for the London papers, but there was something about children's literature that seemed to bring out his best. In 1876, Caldecott exhibited a painting in the Royal Academy Show. A year later, a chance meeting led to his commission to illustrate 2 books of children's verse for a publisher's Christmas line. Both were hits, and he produced 2 a year for the rest of his life. The Caldecotts, as they came to be known, priced at a shilling each, were an event for children in the holidays. By 1884, his 12 books had sold 867,000 copies and enabled Caldecott to retire to the country a famous artist and fellow of the Royal Institute of Painters in Watercolors. Caldecott married in 1880 and with his wife made frequent trips abroad seeking palliatives for his poor health. Afflicted by chronic gastritis and heart trouble, he fell ill in Florida and died there in 1886, just short of his 40th birthday. He was buried in St. Augustine and later honored by a plaque in the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Such was the achievement of Caldecott in just 16 children's books illustrations that the American Library Association inaugurated an annual medal to honor the best young readers illustrator of each year. One of the winners, Maurice Sendak, particularly praised his work as the beginning of the modern picture book, in which there were not simply text and illustrations on the same page, but a juxtaposition of the two, sometimes introducing with the pictures an air of melancholy or joy that ran contrary or in sync with the text. And in that way, he unleashed a departure from previous children's book literature, which had mainly been the retiring or retraining of old nursery rhymes and familiar tales. You'll even to this day find the Caldecott Medal as a foil medallion on the dust jacket of the best children's books of the year. And having had a young nephew in the 1980s, I certainly looked for that every Christmas when Uncle Lindsay's package was getting ready to be sent off from Seattle, where I then lived, to North Carolina. So that's a brief look at the second of our two Victorian illustrators, both born in 1846, both of whom led unfortunately short lives, but who had an enormous influence in how we look at children's literature today. Randolph Caldecott, born in 1846, died in 1886. Next month, we'll be bringing you a new set of authors and illustrators to talk about and reveal some of the stories behind their stories. Until then, I'm Lynn Thompson.
Welcome back. Thank you, Lynn. Always interesting, the story behind the story. Before we bring on Mary Kay, Tony wanted to say hello. Say hello, Tony. All right, go find a mouse. Bookstore cats. Can't live them, can't live with them. Mary Kay. There
Hi.
she is. Hey, the great thing about Lynn's story behind the story is everybody has probably seen that little foil Caldecott medal on the front of a children's books, but not very many of us realized who he was and what he did.
No, true. That goes for me. Did you know that the difference between the Caldecott medal and the Newbery medal is the illustrations?
I didn't know. I read my children Shakespeare, so I never really paid much attention to children's books when they were young.
Yeah. Well, when I was in first grade, our school system used to take the children to the library once a year for a book fair. And you could order little paperbacks then that they had on display, but they also had books on display that the library was going to purchase. And I remember that was 1964, and it was the year that Maurice Sendak won it for Where the Wild Things Are. And I remember that medal. I remember seeing that gold medal on the book.
And we're having a short eulogy later in the show for Beverly Cleary. I think she was was she a Caldecott winner or a Newbery winner, or both?
She was a Newbery winner. She
Okay.
was just a Newbery winner. And actually, Marcia Brown won the most Caldecott medals. She's won 3 medals. Yeah.
Very good. So, what's your subject going to be when you return to the show in a few weeks?
I'm going to talk about Louis Prang and kind of get a. He is known as the father of Christmas cards. He also did, and I have one here. I'll show you. You know, remember these from public school? His Prang company is still in business, and they're still taking care of school children with crayons and watercolors. And so I'm going to talk about him. I'm going to give a little bit of a definition of lithography and chromolithography and the difference, and why his company was so important at this time in the printing industry.
Excellent. Excellent. Good. All right. I'll talk to Alan, figure out when we're going to have you scheduled, but we're definitely going to have you scheduled, Mary Kay. Have a good week.
Okay. Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Ciao. Now, everybody, I would like to introduce you to our next guest. Really fortunate to have him on today, Andrew Stauffer. Andrew is the director of NINES. NINES is the networked infrastructure of 19th century electronic studies. Whew. She sells seashells at the seashore. You're going to have to explain that one to me, Andrew. Andrew, it's a hub of online discovery and scholarship, a peer reviewing organization for digital products. And he's the founder of Book Traces, a crowdsourced project of identifying unique copies of 19th century and early 20th century books on library shelves. He's an associate professor of English at the University of Virginia. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Ed. Great to be here. Yeah, happy to talk about the project. Do you want me to start with the background, or do you want to ask a few questions? Or
yeah, you go ahead. No, you go ahead. You take over for a few minutes.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here. I'm going to share my screen, I think, and just talk alongside some images, if that's all right.
Perfect. Yeah.
That I think what might be helpful. So let me do that and get this going. One sec. So
I see it. It's up.
You got it.
Yep.
So yeah, this is the book. This project all started here. I'm an English professor at the University of Virginia, and I had sent my students into the stacks, just the open stacks, to see if they could bring back some books from the 19th century, the period we were studying, just to see what books looked like from that time and read poetry in those books instead of modern anthologies. And I was expecting we'd talk about the bindings or things like that frontispiece, or sort of the way the poems were arranged. But what happened was that we found these marginalia and inscriptions dating roughly to the era of the books themselves, not student graffiti or patron marks. But if you see look in the upper hand corner of that book, you can see Ellen Pierpont, 1846. The owner has put her name there. And so the more we looked, the more we found this kind of thing. In Ellen's book, in this particular one that came up at random, there was a little poem written in the free end paper at the back, a mournful poem about someone who had died named Mary, our fairest, loveliest flower, Mary, Mary, Mary. And we quickly did a sort of genealogy search, a little Googling, and we discovered that Ellen had a daughter named Mary who had died at the age of 7, and this was a little elegy for her. And the book just sort of shifted in the light at that point. We realized that there was something more going on here than just another copy of Felicia Hemons's poetry, something about women's experience, something about how poetry was being used as comfort and as part of a social experience in the era. And so we began to look more methodically in the stacks. What else was there? Well, it turns out that a lot of books in our library, and it turns out in North American academic libraries generally, were given to the libraries by local families, alumni, faculty, and things like this, where they didn't buy the books from publishers. They came with having had a significant life outside the institution, and they came bearing these traces of everyday reading. And the fact that we had 2 copies of Hemons's poetry, where a mother was mourning the death of a child, using the poetry as a kind of way of processing that, told me as a literary historian that these books had something to say about what poetry meant, how people read, how people used books as social objects, books as mirrors of identity, all sorts of things. And that's where my project, Book Traces, the book, came from. But Book Traces itself has been this larger effort to make contact with these past readers in the great age of the book, arguably the 19th century, before any competition from televisual media or even radio. Books were the age when books were king, and sort of touching those hands of people from the past. These are traced hands around 1855 from a Shakespeare book. It says, Ruthie Whitehead's ugly hand. Oh no, I mean beautiful one. Miriam Trowbridge and Ruthie are tracing each other's hands in these books. And the good thing about being in the digital world now is you can find out so much about these people just with a little digging in Ancestry.com, Google Books, online searches, Find a Grave. You can really begin to put together these family histories. We were talking a bit before about Women's History Month, and this project has also become kind of a history of women's reading. This copy of Geraldine, which is a narrative romance from the later 19th century, this is 1881 copy, was being read by 5 different women. Different handwriting you can see in there, and they're all reacting both to the poem and to each other's evaluations of the characters, the action, who should be kissing who should be flirting with whom, why this is a bad decision for this character. And it really is almost a social media object in the age of print. And so it becomes this way of seeing, again, how people read in this grassroots way. I have a lot of stories I could tell, some really moving examples of things.
Well, before you do that, I'd like to ask you a question.
You go ahead, and I'll turn it back over to you. Do you want to?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I noticed in your introduction that you are the director of Nines. That sounds like a position out of a Philip K. Dick novel.
Yeah, that was
what
back
is
in the day
Nines?
when we gave everything acronyms. Well, that's sort of I got started in this project because I was heavily involved with digitizing the 19th century, digitizing books from that era, and making digital models or digital editions of 19th century texts. And the more I did that, the more I realized how hard it is, how really impossible it is to put a book online. There's always loss, right? You're always modeling certain aspects of the book for online processing, whether it's a page image or a textual transcription or a marked up version of it, whether it's a catalog record. But in any case, it's not the full book. And I got really interested in the residuum, what was left in the books, even after they had been so-called digitized. And these particular copies really brought that home to me, that even though we had digitized a copy, say, of the poetical works of Winthrop Mackworth Praed, you see that on the screen, there are Google book copies of this that you can get, but not this copy at the University of Louisville, where Mary Cosby is really looking back at her young life and how the best years of her life have passed. She takes up the book again, and the bright, happy girl has been changed into the lonely, broken-hearted woman. And so that kind of personal reaction to poetry, that little piece of scholarly evidence of history of reading, is not captured by just one digitized copy. And it was that realization that really sent me down the road with book traces and kind of away from the digitizing and more to the analog.
Andrew, you call this a crowdsourcing project. What do you mean by that? And does that imply that I could participate?
Yeah, so the website is booktraces.org, and this is an image of it. And what you can do there is, now again, we're not doing private collections. We want the books to be addressable as part of the scholarly record, so we're limiting it to institutionalized books that other people can find and examine. We have a pre-1923 limit. I saw a question about that in the chat. Yes, partly it was a copyright. Anything can be shared. 2, I'm a 19th centuryist, and I wanted to focus on material that was kind of particularly relevant to what I knew. And 3, the way those collections were built, those library collections, after, say, the GI Bill, after mid-century for sure, libraries have acquisitions budgets. They're buying books, large quantities of books to support the research methods. American universities and colleges become modernized, and libraries do. But before that, even up until the 30s, most books, a lot of the collections were built via these donations, and therefore the books had a significant life outside. So you can go to booktraces.org. You can, I'll show, these are just, I take students, we visit universities. This is at Columbia. We take people into the stacks. We do these kinds of flash mob bibliography exercises where everyone finds as many as they can. And we sort of talk about what we found, upload them to the site, and think about what that particular institution might want to do in terms of vetting its circulating collections, moving some of it to rare books or whatever they want to do. So that's the crowd. It's both, the website is open to the public, but we've also organized plenty of institution-based trips, field trips, scavenger hunts, book traces days, where we've worked with librarians to really uncover amazing things. And a lot of the material from my book, Book Traces, comes from those visits.
Everybody loves to curl up on a couch on a rainy Sunday afternoon, but we all know that being a bibliophile is a whole lot more than reading.
It is. It's a lot of spending time among books, among the complex ecosystem of books, wherever you find it, whether it's a bookstore or a library. And books always have things to tell you that you can't see virtually. You have to be among them, as you all know. This audience knows more than anyone.
I know when I go out on a book buying trip, my response to the owner is, "Thank you for allowing me to fondle your books."
This has been that project. It's really hands-on books. There's no way to find this material except open every page, turn every book over. And so it takes a village. It takes an army of volunteers and students, librarians, content specialists. And it's it's an endless, not endless, but it's a very large project of which we've only grabbed the little bit of as we've been able to. We've had some grants to do this sort of work. But it's, my goal is to get the word out to people who live near an academic library or involved with the university to go into the stacks and to begin to let me know if that institution seems to have a particularly rich vein of these gift books that come bearing the history of 19th century reading.
Before we have you finish up with another anecdote, I see that our colleague Lee has joined us. And Lee, what have you found in a book lately?
Muted. There we go. Well, this is a personal book. This is a copy of Wildflowers of the Southeastern United States, certainly much later than 1923. It's from 1975, published by the University of Georgia Press. It's a well-known wildflower book, and wildflowers are something that my family has been very interested in. And we use the book to keep a record of where and when we would see various flowers. And I don't know how much glare. Let's see if we can get it so you can see it.
That looks good.
Okay, out in this margin on this side over here, there are little notes. And they would say, blue cohosh was seen at the Shirley Miller Boardwalk, which is a wildflower area named for Zell Miller's wife up in Walker County, Georgia, on 4/2/2006. And then umbrella leaf in the Smokies and Sosby's Cove, twin leaf in our yard, 2007. And in the back of the book is an elaborate list. Let's see if we can see that. Of okay, it's, I don't, you probably
a little bit of glare, but I think we can see.
Well, anyway, it's an elaborate list of abbreviations for locations that we would see the wildflowers. Includes everything from our yard to various trails in the Smokies and off the Blue Ridge Parkway and in North Georgia, and primarily around North Georgia and North Carolina. And so we've also for many years kept a flower journal that stays in the car, that when traveling we would note what we saw and where we saw it, and it is a nice history of our involvement with wildflowers, if nothing else. And in about 3 weeks, I'm going to be doing a segment on wildflower books and wildflowers. And Lynn was talking earlier about spring being in South Carolina, and spring is most definitely here. We've been hit by heavy rains, but my daffodils are just about gone by now, and wildflowers are just coming up everywhere. So it's really been a beautiful spring. But it shows that the idea of keeping track of what's going on in your life through Marginalia is still going on.
What a great scavenger hunt that would be. Andrew, is that the type of book that we might someday load up to the Traces, booktraces.org?
Well, that one is a little bit past our time frame. We're trying to do the pre-23s, and it's not in a library. So okay. Something like that, yes, for sure. That's the kind of thing that we find interesting. I'm just going to share one more time, and this, let's see if I can do this there. This example, talking about flowers. So here's one, a book from 1876, The Changed Cross and Other Poems. You can see it's inscribed to Mary E. Deering with much love, Charles, November 3rd, 1876. That's the John Deere family. This book has ended up in the circulating collection at the University of Miami. We found it one day on a scavenger hunt down there. The death notice for Anne Deering is pasted in there. She died in childbirth only a year after their marriage. And so the book has become a sort of souvenir of her and of her death. Below it, a little flower pasted in with those paper staples glued in. And the flower itself has been annotated, Annie, December 20th, 1877. It looks like maybe a sprig from a visit to her grave around Christmas time. And so you see how the book has begun to gather to itself these sort of records, these souvenirs of Annie's experience. And the book is fascinating because Annie actually read it on her deathbed. Later in the book, a little further on, you see this Marginalia at the top of the poem, Coming, by Barbara McAndrew. A short time before her death, Annie asked her mother to read this poem, saying that she often thought of it. Mrs. Case read it in the presence of those gathered about the deathbed. And on the facing page, Annie tried to read here, but her sight failed. I guess I can't read it, she said, smiling. And so that vignette, a moving example of how poetry was involved with the lives and the deaths of these 19th century readers, here encoded into a book which has become a souvenir of Annie, of her loss, and of these later memorials, with the flower really, doing that kind of work. So there's lots of examples in the project of flowers in books. Here, this example, this little sprig, this is a poem about death of a child over there on the left. It ends, I will see, thou shalt see me there, the child is saying to the mother in heaven. So the fact that sprig has been stapled in, or sort of stitched in there with the paper, suggests that it too has some relevance to the loss, a personal loss, the loss of a child. I know the owner of this book. I mean, the owner's name is in there. I've done the whole genealogy. Yes, she lost a son. It makes sense, as most 19th century families did, and that flower becomes a comment. And what's interesting later is that publishers pick up on this and actually start, illustrators. You can see over here this pansy in a late copy of Wordsworth has been stitched in by the illustrator. That readerly practice has become a publishing practice as 19th century readers, publishers, illustrators, poets all think about ways that flowers are involved with poems. So I have a whole chapter called Gardens of Verse, which is on this phenomenon in the book.
Hope you'll come back. I just got a little notice on our chat screen over here from David. Said he just went to Amazon, he bought a copy, and you're only down to 10 left.
Well, you can. Amazon might be running out, but go to the University of Pennsylvania website, the press. They have plenty. Probably, who knows? Bookshop.org might have them. Amazon tries to invent false scarcity, but there's plenty of copies out there. If you can't find one, let me know and I'll get it for you.
Will do. But I appreciate your comment. Support your local independent bookseller, new, used, or rare. We're a fixture in the community out there.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Andrew. I hope you'll come back.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Good. All right. Okay, everybody. Next, we're going to have a short eulogy of Beverly Cleary. And being from Portland, Oregon, as I am, we're particularly saddened over the loss. Last year, it was Ursula Le Guin. And women authors in the city of Portland have a strong tradition. Now they're being followed by people like Cheryl Strayed. But Beverly Cleary herself published over 91 million books. Just think about that. And I recently heard a little interview with Beverly, and what she said was, when she was working at the library in Yakima, Washington, she never read the children a book. She told them a story. That just sounds so enchanting. I think we've got a quick video eulogy of Beverly. Alan? There we are. Beezus and Ramona. Her first book was published in 1950, and it was Henry Huggins. Henry had a couple of friends. It was Beverly, Ralph the Mouse, Ramona Quimby, and the whole gang.
And reread some of hers, I'm like, oh yeah, she absolutely had an influence on me, and it stayed all those years.
I was born in Cuba, but I immigrated to the U.S. when I was about three. And my family lived very close to a branch of the local library. And so my mom used to take my brother and I there, partly so that we'd become readers, but also partly so that we would learn English better.
The librarian suggested books that she thought young Anamari would enjoy.
My memory is that the very first one was Beezus and Ramona. I just loved the Beezus books, the ones with Ramona, and then the Henry Huggins. I am quite sure that I have read every single one. In many ways, they were my introduction to this country. I have one more memory. It's part of why Ramona and Beezus were so special to me, and that's that in most U.S. books, the kids have blonde hair. She could be Cuban. These were kids that looked like us.
Okay, it's time to take out a good book and find a comfortable spot and read.
Each year, on April 12th, Beverly Cleary's birthday, schools and communities participate in Drop Everything and Read Day, which Ramona made famous.
How do we get kids to fall in love with reading? How do we get them to fall in? Well, Ramona helped me fall in and kind of find my place. And so I wanted to study children's literature. I wanted to study how books like hers were able to create an entire genre.
Henry Huggins was in the 3rd grade. His hair looked like a scrubbing brush,
and most of his grown-up front teeth were in.
He lived with his mother and father in a square white house on Klickitat Street.
The books that she wrote in the 50s are still, I think, read and loved by people as much as they were then, and that's extraordinary.
Beverly Cleary's books are enjoyed around the world and have been translated into more than 14 languages. And in 2000, Beverly Cleary was designated a Library of Congress Living Legend. Just 3 years later, she was awarded a National Medal of Arts by President George W. Bush.
Beverly Cleary is one of the most significant children's writers in the whole pantheon of American children's literature.
She just had so many stories and ideas that she needed to share and characters that she wanted to share. And I think that was her destiny, to share those children and those stories with generations of children.
I just have a good memory. And I think it was probably living 6 years on a farm where I didn't have a lot of distractions. I learned by observing and remembering.
It's about Mrs. Cleary, because without her, we would not have these wonderful books. And it's wonderful books that inspire children to be readers.
When you reread Beverly Cleary's in your 40s and 50s and 60s, it's just as good as the first time.
The young woman from Yamhill, Oregon, who started school in the lowest reading group, changed writing for children forever.
Oh yes, it's been happy all the way. I've had a long and exceptionally happy career.
Welcome back. That was just beautiful. The children in the book look just like us. What a great comment that is. All right, let's bring back in Barbara. Hello. Lee, are you still with us there?
Yes.
All right. I think all three of us were at the Ephemera Fair last week. Is that right?
Yes.
How'd you do?
I was very pleased. Not just with what I sold during the fair, but with things I sold after the fair, or that people during the fair went to my website and picked out additional things than what I had in the fair. My total, I don't know. Do you want to know my total?
Share with us what you care to.
So counting all of that together, about $2,800 over the 4 days, which for me was a very good weekend. Maybe not like a in-person show, might have been, but still, but very, very good. And the good thing about it was, and the good thing for me about these virtual shows has been partly contact with people that I would never have contact with at a live show, because my live shows have been pretty much regional in the Southeast.
Yeah.
And so I sold to people in California, to universities in Maryland and Wisconsin, and people in New York. A much wider range of a geographic range than I would have.
I sold one item to the University of Pennsylvania. I always love it with one of my items, make it into an institution for preservation. Yeah. That's always exciting.
Yeah, it is. And then after a nice sale to Johns Hopkins during the show, then they came back and bought another 50% more stuff just from my regular catalog.
Good for you. Well, I'm not a very good bookkeeper. I'm not a very good bookkeeper, so I don't know how much I sold dollar-wise. I know I sold 13 out of 31 items.
Well, that's more than I think I sold from the show items 9 or 10 out of the 50 I had listed. This is the first ephemera show I've ever done, and it's hard to know in advance what kind of things people are looking for.
Well, especially us as book dealers. I don't think us as book dealers have had exposure to that market as much.
I mean, we've always had ephemera, particularly African American and music related. But it's like any show. You don't know what to take. You don't ever know what to take.
Well, I'll tell you what I sold a lot of, and that was photograph albums. Especially albums that are annotated in the vernacular. Who, what is where, who is in front of the statue, where is the statue located, who are the family members. And I think that's indicating a trend in collecting nowadays. I always say the current generation doesn't like the old brown books, the books from the 19th century, while perhaps still have value. They like things that are a little more sexy, a little more colorful, a little more interactive. Maybe just not so heavy.
Yeah. Well, I sold a family archive that had about 20-something photos of a extended multi-generational family in Baltimore, and a couple of other photos as well, to photo dealers. And that's someone I don't normally have contact with.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very pleased. And the good thing about it, you can sit around in your pajamas, as long as you've got your phone handy.
and keep the camera off.
Right. You can keep the camera off. You can do that.
Very good. Very good. So, Lee, I understand you're not going to be with us in a couple of weeks. Any words of wisdoms or books you want to leave behind?
Well, okay. My son and daughter-in-law went to a wedding in San Antonio this past weekend. And they went to, let me see what the name of it was again, the Twig Bookshop in downtown San Antonio, and bought a book for their 8-year-old daughter called Rebel Girls Lead, 25 Tales of Powerful Women. And it seems to be part of a little series of books about mostly, I think, contemporary women, written for girls around her age. And this one has, just on the cover, it has Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Kamala Harris. But it also had gymnasts and, various other people. And Clara was just fascinated with it. And she said, I didn't know they did all of this. And I think it was a great gift for her to see what women are doing. And of course, it was great that it came from an independent bookshop as well.
Sure.
And there are other books in the series that will get her as she finishes this one. And she comes from a line of very independent women, and she's going to be a very independent woman, and is encouraged to see things her way and to do what she wants to do. And I think this is a real inspiration for her to see what other women have done. So it was a good purchase.
Good. I mean, there's no question that reading, education for every generation is the foundation for growth. Access to books, access to ideas, and more access to women in the workplace, in government, is good for all of us.
And in 3 weeks, I'm going to do a wildflower segment. And one book that I'll be using is Mrs. William Starr Dana's How to Know the Wildflowers. She was at that time using her husband's name. He died shortly after this was published in 1893. But it's written by a woman. It's illustrated by a woman. This is not a first printing. The first printing had color plates in it of flowers that were also done by a woman. And the jacket decoration is by Margaret Armstrong. So this was an entirely woman, not produced because it was printed by, I think this is by Scribner's, but still, I think that's pretty good in 1893 that 4 women were involved in the production of this book. And this is one that we'll be talking about in a few weeks.
Good. I have my own wildflower book. This one is a Texas
Oh, that's a
Roadside
nice
View
book. That is a really
Lady
pretty
Bird
book.
Johnson. This one signed on her book plate. She did so much for wildflowers in America.
She did.
Okay, is Barbara Lowe joined us? Is Barbara with us this week? Don't see her there. Okay, folks. Well, that's about ready to wrap it up. Next week, we're going to be featuring more about virtual book fairs. We're going to have 2 fairs coming up in the month of April. One is an East Coast fair, highlighting the DC area and the book sellers of Florida. Lee, are you going to be in on that one?
Yes, I am. And when the fair opens, I will, and I hope my grandchildren won't see this broadcast, but we will be in Disney World the day the fair opens. This is a surprise trip for my grandchildren. But I'll have my phone handy.
Okay.
So I can handle this. And I've already started listing my books, and I'll be ready in time. So
great. And then a few weeks after that will be the West Coast Fair from San Diego all the way up to Seattle. And I like the word that you used before, Andrew, ecosystem. Yeah. Books, it's such an echo, from libraries to virtual fairs to live fairs to book conservatorship. Just, it's so broad. Are you a collector, Andrew? Do you collect your own books as well?
I'm not a serious collector, but I gather things to me. I gather lots of books that I use in my teaching and in my research, and I'm using older books all the time. So if you ask my partner or my friends, I have way too many. My office is overflowing at school, but they're important, and I use them for all sorts of things. But I don't have like a high-end collection. It's mostly a working collection.
Okay. Well, you know what they say, you can't have too many books. You could just have too few bookshelves.
So true. So true.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I want to remind you that you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, podcasts, through the Anchor Network, Google Podcasts. We've got a great show next week with our regulars, David Hess, Lynn Thompson, Jerry Morris, Barbara Lowe, and some live guests next week as well. Alan, thanks for putting it all together. See you next week, folks.
Thanks to you all. Thanks for having me.
Bye.